Yesterday I had some internet connection trouble at the Willem de Koning Academy. So here's a little screen video. Uh, I would like you to help a little bit to move on in the coming weeks with this wicked undefined problem we have. So everyone had to choose a location. Everyone is developing a program. So you have a bunch of activities and houses, and you have a site. And then the next step would be how to compose a building volume that would house these activities. And let's start simple. How in history housing or multiple houses were organized? Well, the left image is the closed block. In Dutch, gesloten bouwblok. And in cities in last century, this was a very popular and efficient way of organizing housing in the city, as we see in the city, for example, of Rotterdam. This is Rotterdam, and you immediately see this beautiful pattern of closed blocks. Like they have, of course, different sizes, different depths, but all are closed blocks. And why this was such a popular way of organizing housing? Well, first of all, the front side could be kept very formal. So everyone's passing by and see this nice facade. And the inside could be more individual, like you could store old stuff and no one would see it. And a very big benefit of a closed block would be as well to have privacy. So no one from outside could enter. You could leave your back door open. It's safe. And it's also remarkably quiet because of sound. So, well, it was a very popular way of organizing, and well, you can imagine that developers would like to keep it easy and cheap. So even the rectangular block is a very popular way to organize. And here you have different shapes. You maybe ask, like, why this crazy shapes? Well, that is of course due to the natural lines of a city. So sometimes the investment just couldn't cover to make a complete rectangular grid. So that's how you can kind of understand the kind of battle between an ambition of rectangularity and efficiency and the shape of the city itself. And the shape of the fields of a city, as I used to call it in Major 2.2, so those are fields, this we call urban morphology. If you just study the shapes and the sizes of all these blocks, you would kind of notice that the size from here to here, and let's call it the depth of the blocks, is always around, well, let's say between 8 meter and 12 meter. It's never bigger. And why it's never bigger? Well, that's because of daylight. Because there is a law in the Netherlands that says that every room of a house, except a bathroom or a storage room, needs a minimal amount of daylight. So imagine this block would be twice deep. What to do with the inside? There is no light, so it's not allowed. In Amsterdam, you have blocks deep of 30 meters, but then you will always have a patio in the middle, a front house and a back house, like Anne Frank in the back house, for example. So the closed block is a very archetypical way of organizing multiple houses in a city. Let's go to Blijdorp. So this is the Blijdorp. It's a urban design from Van den Broek and Bakema. The same office as designed the Lijnbaan and many different other projects in Rotterdam. And they were organizing here this beautiful estate with a nice green zone in the middle, closed building blocks with BO's and BOBO's. It means a benedenwoning, a bovenwoning. It means like that there are four layers, so 2 layers, one house, and 2 layers up, 2 houses. And then in this block, kind of a revolutionary step happened. They opened up the block. So the closed block suddenly was open. And why they would open the block? Well, in this case, to share the beautiful view with all the inhabitants in the block to the park. So here, a happy few people enjoy the view, and here, most of the people standing on the balcony could enjoy the view. So it's kind of a democratization of comfort. And modernist movement like the CIAM, the Congrès International Architectuur Moderne, came up and they started to develop this kind of estates. So the blocks became stripes, slabs, row houses. And a big benefit of a row house of the closed block is that these corners in the closed block, you had always the problem in the corner, because in the corner there is no daylight possible for this house. So of course you can do something and arrange something, but in order to economize, to make it more economical, I'm sorry for my English, they kind of erase this problem. So a housing estate was developed by stamps. So this is one stamp. And for example, here you would have family houses, here you would have elderly people, and here you would have starters, and they calculated how many people would need this kind of type, and they start to repeat it, these stamps, with beautiful common green areas. Very efficient, very economical, so rents could get lower, and maybe the comfort, the average comfort, could be bigger. So some people would hate this kind of areas, and these examples, for example, in East Germany, where you have this endless repetition of the same blocks, they also had a benefit. People had lower rents, so they could save some money for their children to go to study, etc. So when you speak about multiple housing, there's always an economical and a political issue connected. And if you just look at beauty and space, you would go to see Kralingen. You have these other types, like individual bigger houses, and then immediately you would go to higher income. It's really fun to float around a city and to study the morphology of the city and to study the blocks. And you see this adventure of architects, for example, here in the heliport, when you have this double triangular site, it's called heliport. And an architect started to struggle to transform a closed block into something different. And then And that's the fun of this project as well. There are many things possible, but always notice there's always daylight involved. So you have the archetypes are the closed block and the schijf, the slab. And then you can start make variations. Yeah, I mean a vertical slab, by the way, is a tower. Let's also talk a bit about towers. Go back, where are towers in Rotterdam? Well, next to our school, we have a bunch of towers, new towers, old towers, and the red apple is a nice example. The red apple. If you look at towers, you can absolutely be sure that always in the middle there would be no rooms because there's no light. So there is the elevators, the stairs, the pipes, etc. So all the things that don't need daylight are in the middle, and wrapped around the tower the houses. Sometimes they're similar, and when there's a smart architect, he would make variations because the best view is probably here, so let's profit, most of the people should profit from this view. But the archetype of a tower is always a core in the middle and the housing 3, 4 or 5 houses wrapped around it. It's always fun if you look at a block and to start to imagine how many houses would be in, how many different types. For example, here, a big variation of different types. This is, by the way, it's also housing by Rem Koolhaas. Here's the core, and there are multiple apartments, eccentrical core. This one by Alvaro Siza. It's often the most expensive houses are on the top. I don't think it's fair. So you have the tower, the slab, and the block. And I found something funny here. It's called 50 Urban Blocks, publisher A&T Architecture Publishers. And it's kind of a quartet or play, I don't know exactly, where there's many different configurations of how to configure housing, multiple housing. And I don't know if we should go so much in detail, but it's even talking about floor area ratio, and that's about density. So you have a site, you have a plot, and then you have an amount of houses, and then there's a number, it's called density. So yes, it is interesting to try to think about how dense you would like to have your project. Um, so what are the main elements if you think about blocks? Well, I said it's daylight. So daylight is a very important thing in housing. Only a bathroom can be without daylight. Then we have view. For example, here you have this terrace. And if you would have these terraces looking up north into a factory, it would be probably better to turn it around to the south and to kind of point it to the park. So there's view and there's sun. So those two parameters are crucial. So, and then a third parameter that is important, and I will talk about it later when we are developing our block, is the access system. So how would you enter this house on top? And how would you enter this house over here? How would you enter this house? There are like multiple ways of access system, etc. But that's for later. I hope by these two archetypes you start in your mind or in your project already thinking a little bit about how in the basic you would like to configure these different kind of houses in your plan, and you can start playing, transforming, I mean, even freaking out, we're an art school, so don't be scared, don't be afraid. Thanks. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me in Teams, and see you next week.